You are not allowed to enter this place. It's inside the Vatican. Most people will never see it, not because it doesn't exist, but because access is controlled. And what's kept behind those doors has shaped history for centuries. It's called the Vatican Apostolic Archives. But that name is misleading, because this is not just an archive. It's one of the most restricted places in the world. Inside, there are miles of documents, letters from kings, messages from popes, records of decisions that changed entire countries. Some of them are hundreds of years old. Others were never meant to be seen, and almost no one is allowed to access them, not because they are lost, but because they are kept hidden. The Vatican says these archives are open, but that's not entirely true. Access is extremely limited. Only a small number of researchers are allowed inside, and even then, they don't get to see everything. Entire sections remain inaccessible. Documents that are never requested, never shown, and others are simply too sensitive to be handled. So the real question is not what's inside, but what you're not allowed to see. Some of the documents stored here are not just historical, they are deeply personal. Letters written by powerful men at the exact moment everything was about to change. One of those letters came from King Henry VIII. At the time, he was one of the most powerful rulers in Europe. But even he needed permission. He wrote directly to the Pope, asking for something that would alter his entire future. He wanted his marriage to be annulled, not for love, but for power. Because without it, he had no heir. And without an heir, his dynasty would collapse. The answer he received changed everything. It didn't just affect him, it divided an entire nation. And that moment, that decision, is still preserved inside the Vatican archives. Hidden, but never erased. But not all the documents in these archives are about power. Some of them are about truth. Truth that was once considered dangerous. One of the most famous cases is Galileo Galilei, a scientist who challenged the way people understood the universe. At the time, it was believed that the Earth was at the center of everything. But Galileo said something different. He claimed that the Earth moves and that the sun is at the center. What we accept today as fact was once seen as a threat. His ideas were judged, his words were recorded, and his case was documented and preserved. Not just as science, but as something that had to be controlled. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing is not power, but the truth. But maybe these archives are not just about the past. Maybe they're not just about kings, or scientists, or history. Maybe they're about something else entirely. Because when information is stored, it can also be controlled. And when something is controlled, it can be limited. And when it is limited, it can be reshaped. And when it is reshaped, it can change the way people understand reality itself. Because what we know is only what we are allowed to know. And what we believe is often based on what we are shown. So the real question is not what is hidden inside these archives. The real question is, who decides what you are allowed to see? Who decides what gets remembered and what gets forgotten? Because sometimes, the most powerful thing is not what is written, but what is never shown. And the Vatican is not the only place where this happens, but it may be one of the most powerful. Because for centuries, it has not only stored information, it has decided what is preserved and what is left behind. Not all the records inside the Vatican archives are about ideas that were silenced. Some are about people who refuse to stay silent. One of those cases is Giordano Bruno, a philosopher who didn't just question the world, he questioned everything. He spoke about an infinite universe, about countless worlds beyond our own. Ideas that, at the time, were considered dangerous. He was arrested, interrogated, judged for years. And unlike Galileo, he never took his words back. The records of his trial still exist. The questions he was asked, the answers he refused to change, the decisions made behind closed doors, and the final outcome. He was declared guilty and executed, not just for what he said, but for refusing to deny it. And those records are still preserved, not as a warning, but as a reminder of what happens when truth and authority collide. And all of this is only a fraction of what is stored inside those archives, because for every document we know exists, there are countless others we will never see. Stories that were recorded but never told. Decisions that shaped the world but were never fully revealed. And moments that disappeared, not because they didn't happen, but because they were never shown. This is just the beginning. Because this is not a single story, it's a series. And in the next videos, we'll go deeper, further into the archives, further into what has been hidden. So if you want to see what comes next, make sure you're here when it's revealed. Because the deeper you look, the more you start to realize how much has been left out. And the real question is, Gipahund, how much of what you know is actually the full story, and how much of it was chosen for you?